Hi everyone, this is Krista Moore with The Krista Moore Show. Thanks for joining us today. This show is brought to you by K Coaching and ID Growth as a new way to learn from industry experts and thought leaders. And I'm very excited about our guest today. And I'd like to introduce you to Lauren McGhee. So Lauren, we met. You didn't know I was in the audience, but I met you when you were on stage speaking, and I thought to myself, oh, I have to have her be a guest on the show. So I'm thrilled you're here today.
Thank you so
much.
Why
don't you go ahead and maybe tell the audience a little bit about yourself so that they know what our topic is going to be about and get to know you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to be here. So Lauren McGhee Coaching is my company. I am a Gallup certified Strengths Finder coach, and that is a mouthful. But essentially what that means is I spend my days taking the Strengths Finder, the Gallup Strengths Finder assessment and tools, and using them for coaching executives and doing team development sessions within organizations. And I speak about that as well. So I speak on living and working out of a strengths-based mindset.
Yeah. So some of you might be familiar. And I was asking her earlier today, what year was it that that book came out that was kind of a rave, which was Now Discover Your Strengths, where you could take this assessment online, and a lot of people started looking at themselves a little bit differently, and organizations did as well. So tell us a little bit about kind of that progression from the late 90s, I think it was, to today on this Gallup study.
Yeah, so it came about in 1997 with Now Discover Your Strengths, as you mentioned, and now it has been upgraded to StrengthsFinder 2.0. They found some of the strengths did not translate into different languages, and they've basically just upped the ante with understanding how to communicate each talent more specifically. StrengthsFinder was a result of a 40-year study on human talent and development. So the team of psychologists discovered that when you focus on capitalizing on your strengths as opposed to fixing your weaknesses, you become more engaged in work and therefore in life. And everybody loves talking about what they're great at. So that is why it has been a raging success.
Well, and I think too about coaching others and trying to help them be their best. Often we want to kind of play big from a position of strength. You know, we want them to know what their strengths are and then maximize that. And usually what we find is, you know, they're doing what they love and they love what they do when they get to that point. Right. Is that what you're experiencing?
Absolutely. My catchphrase is thriving in your design.
Okay.
Right? So when you understand the innate design and the natural gifts and talents you have within you, why would you not do them, right? And you feel like you've achieved more on a daily basis when you're able to function in those strengths.
So tell me how this works within corporations, let's say, or companies, where maybe you're in a role or in a position where you might be bored or you're not liking it, or you feel like you're not using all of your best strengths, or maybe someone keeps bringing out a weakness in you. What would you say to maybe that company or a person about this whole strengths-based mindset and how that works?
So it doesn't have to be a catastrophic change. If you are not thriving in your work, it does not necessarily mean you have to leave the job and leave the industry and the company altogether. Sometimes it's just as simple as tweaking what you do every day. If you are a wooer, right? If you have woo in your top strengths and you're an extrovert and you're stuck in an office all day long, obviously, you're probably not going home at the end of the day feeling excited about what you've done. So how do you adjust that? Can you work from a coffee shop once a week where you meet new people and sort of fill that woo bucket within you? And I would start there at the small things, right, from a leadership perspective as well.
And so how many traits are there that are done with this assessment? Is it 30-something?
34.
Okay.
34 strengths, and they all fall into 4 different categories.
Okay.
Executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking.
And then the assessment typically determines what your top 5 are. Like, what's your 5? What does that mean exactly?
So what that means is the way that you answer the assessment, you have a proficiency in these top 5 in their exact order. So more often than not, if your communication is number 1, you're probably going to fall under the communication umbrella more often than not.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how do you see taking these strengths within organizations and building teams from that?
So my catchphrase as well is there is no such thing as a well-rounded person, but well-roundedness is only functional within a team. So hire based on the strengths that you do not have. So a very successful team is one that can check off all of the categories, relationship builders and influencers, etc., where people that are not alike whatsoever have come together under the same cause. And that breeds success in companies.
That's interesting. So what are your strengths? What are your top 5?
So in order, my top 5 are responsibility, communication, developer, positivity, and empathy.
And what does that mean exactly?
So 3 out of my 5 strengths fall into the relationship building bucket. So more often than not, I will choose people over task. However, the number 1 most common strength for women in America, which is also my number 1 strength of responsibility, is an execution strength. So that means that if you ask me to do something, I will do it until I get it done, and not only done, but done well. And it will weigh on my shoulders until I have completed it. And communication is my influencing strength, and that is what I speak from on stage all the time. It's what I use most often.
So when did you discover your strengths?
Let's see. I graduated from UNC Wilmington with my bachelor's degree, go Seahawks, and I moved 3 months later to San Diego, California for a ministry school. And in my first semester at this ministry school, part of our graduation process was to go through the StrengthsFinder assessment from a faith-based perspective, of course. And when I got the assessment, I learned so much about me. Everything that I had thought about myself in a good or a bad way was put on paper in a really positive way. And long story short, the woman that came in to coach us on those talents became a very good friend of mine. And I learned that she was getting paid to show people what they're great at in companies and in faith-based organizations as well. She was speaking about it too. And so I just fell in love with that ideology and wanted to start my own business doing what she did.
Yeah, and you've done that at a very young age.
Yes.
Tell me the story, and I don't know the story. I just remember that there was a story about speaking on stage.
Yes.
And I think it was competitive speaking.
Yes.
Competition like a forensics team.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Beta Club was the name of the club, and it's very similar to National Honor Society. And I was asked by my school that would very involved in Beta Club, my school was, and I was asked to run for the vice presidency position for the state of North Carolina at 16 years old. So my task was to deliver a speech, a 5-minute speech in front of 3,000 of my peers.
Oh my goodness. At 16?
At 16, yes, already awkward enough, and then put you on stage, right? So 3,000 of my peers from all different levels of the state. And then a skit came afterward, and then the audience would vote on who their favorite speaker was. And I won somehow. I think it's mainly because the skit was amazing, but I remember walking on stage and just having that microphone in my hand and realizing this is for me. This is
what you want to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you were playing big from your communication strengths for sure. And probably a lot of the other ones came into play too.
And I had
like
no
responsibility.
Idea. Right. And taking psychological
It was all
ownership.
of them actually, like
all of
right
them.
there on stage at that moment.
You did listen to my speech, yes.
That's
the whole premise.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, isn't it great though when we can discover our strengths and be able to build a business around it, or to go to work every day and be in that space. And I took my strengths finders too, and I thought it was kind of interesting. So I'm going to read you what mine were in order,
please.
And then help me understand them a little bit.
Sure.
And by doing that, I think it also helps the audience understand how these strengths do vary.
Yeah.
And everybody's unique. So the first one is strategic, second is maximizer, third is futuristic, fourth is activator, and fifth is belief. So what does that tell you about me?
So lots of things. I'll pinpoint a few. So you have 2 strategic thinking strengths, and you have 2 influencing strengths, and you also have an execution strength. So by the way,
makes sense.
Yes, you know yourself. So the influencing category is the least common to find in someone's top 5. So you're a bit of a unicorn. So that means that more often than not, you are absorbing and analyzing information and getting people excited about the future. That's the strategic thinking ability. Additionally, at the same time, you're able to influence people with your activator and your maximizer, and be the voice and the leader behind the causes that you believe in.
Yeah, like the hat lady. And my show. And then so much what we do with K Coaching is strategy creation.
Right.
And helping people, set their goals and maximize their strengths, which just kind of like fits into all that.
Right.
Yeah.
You are thriving in your design, Kristen.
What about the belief one?
Yeah, so belief is, I'm not supposed to say this, but it's one of my favorite strengths. So it's an execution strength. And what that means is people that have this strength in their top 5, they have this consistent set of priorities that drives everything that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And if they tend to have a very strong moral compass, whatever those morals may be for
Mm-hmm.
each person, and if they're in a situation where those morals are compromised, they're out. Right? So they are true and loyal through and through.
So that's a good one. So a lot of you, I'm just going to tell this quick story because that is so true. So when I worked at corporate America, I had a boss that had an anger management problem, and some of you have heard this story before, but I mean a real, like, turned into the Incredible Hulk kind of thing when he got angry.
Yeah.
But he would be disrespectful to people and yell and and he could empty your room, is how serious it was. So one time he was yelling at me, and I quit. I absolutely left my corporate job with no backup, no plan, and I had a pretty cush job, but I was the major breadwinner for the family, and people thought I was crazy for quitting this job, and I left, but I know it was because it so went against how people should be treated.
Right.
Like, you don't talk to people that way.
Right.
and so I just. And so when you said, what was the term that you used? You end it or you leave it?
Oh, if it compromises your values, you're
out of there.
Out of there.
Yeah, I was out of there.
Yeah, belief is passion plus action. That's how I define that strength all the time.
Oh, that's a good one to remember. Because you don't think about belief as action. Like, belief is more of just
an internal. Right? But that's what makes it an execution strength.
Yeah.
Right? Because belief takes those beliefs that you have and it puts them into action.
So I'm going to need to read the book again and better understand like what each of these strengths mean. So I'm just going to show the audience for a moment. So when you take it online, then you get this printout, and it shows you what's referred to as the signature themes, and that's where you have like your top 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that you've seen a gazillion of these.
Yes.
So wasn't there a statistic about like how common is it for people to have the same top 5?
Not at all. So the chances of you having the same top 5 strengths in the exact same order as another person is literally a 1 in 33 million chance.
See, isn't that crazy?
Right.
I find that just to be astonishing.
It is.
So are there any similarities though? Let's say between male and female. So are there strengths that, because Gallup, and many of you know, I'm sure they're taking all of this data and creating a lot of findings from it and analyzing it and subsetting it. But what are some themes that come out between males and females? Just curious.
Sure. So the basis is that there are no commonalities. There are not any strengths that are only specific to women and vice versa. However, there are certain strengths that have tendencies in one gender versus the other. So for example, the most common strength for men in America is achiever. Most common strength for women in America is responsibility. Women tend to have more empathy, more relationship building abilities. Now, I'll use command as an example.
Okay.
Command is the rarest strength in the world. For all people, it's even rarer for women. So you have probably never met another woman or another person that has this strength. And what's difficult is perception, right? So men versus women. When a man has command, the ability to walk into a room and have presence and lead change, it comes across as a great leader. When a woman has this ability, it can sometimes come across as bossy or unapproachable. So it's all perception. And when you understand the strengths behind the person, it just gives a whole different filter for a conversation.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. And it also just made me think of something. I think it's great that if I know my strengths and if I'm going to go into a partnership or, a new relationship or have a new employee, I think it would be awesome to sit there and say, let's talk about your strengths, let me talk about mine. And I did that as something similar with Bria because I had her take her strengths finders not too long ago.
Yeah, great.
And so tell me what you do across the world. I mean, aren't there differences from a geography standpoint too?
For sure. Yeah, so like I mentioned, the specific strengths to men and women in America, what's interesting is that it's completely different for Japan and for Germany. So for Japan, more common strengths are ideation and futuristic. Those cutting edge, thinking ahead strengths. For Germany, it's very execution, deliberative, right? So, and America is literally a just do it culture. So of course, the 2 most common strengths would be in the execution category. So there are all these geographical differences.
So is this DNA?
I get asked that question a lot, and my answer always is nature versus nurture, and I never know which one is which, but you do.
That's a good way to divert that answer.
Right. Parents and children share different strengths, and they also go completely opposite of each other. And I think part of it is just what you're born with, your design, your DNA.
Yeah.
Part of it's just learning.
Yep. Yeah. So it is, when I think about that, how I'm describing this to myself is you're born with this DNA.
Sure.
And then you have these experiences and this learning on top of it that includes the culture and the environment that you're in. And then you seek out additional learning and development to make you who you are and kind of shine.
Right.
So if you're at that third piece where you haven't looked into, well, more about me, to discover those strengths, then you can't really put that plan forward to make changes that could make you more happy, more purposeful.
Yeah, and it speaks to the fact that you and I may share the strengths of activator, but mine will look completely different from yours because of your own experiences, your background, your upbringing, and all of the rest of your strengths, because they're always all
and
working
if belief
together.
is an activator and belief is part of me, and then it's going to be very strong if I have belief and an activator.
Right, a lot of action with that passion.
Yeah, okay, all right, I'm going to put it into action. I wanted to share with you, and this is with Bria's permission, I had her do the Strengths Finders, and just a little bit of a backdrop, and this goes to any of you that are a manager or, you know, a boss, so to speak, or a business owner. This is a terrific thing to do with your employees. But I like to bring on young female, kind of just out of college, and help mentor them in their career as their first move. So we have a lot of fun doing that. It's just something that I enjoy. So Bria was with us for 6 months. She has a marketing and PR degree from Virginia Tech. She's an all-star athlete, played soccer, you know, and she was ready to start her first real job out of college. Anyhow, about 6 months into it, I was noticing different things, and I'm wondering, you know, what are her strengths and how can I take them and, you know, bring them out in her every day? And is she in the right role? And, you know, those kinds of things. So I had her do this.
Yeah.
And she is, number one was futuristic, and then individualization, responsibility, includer, and restorative.
Yeah.
So what can you tell me about Bria from those?
So I'll speak to responsibility first, since that's my number one strength and the most common for women. So the responsibility is a psychological ownership of things that you have committed to. So as I'm sure the way you talk about her, she is a follow-through kind of person. So when you are managing someone with this, the one thing to watch out for is never give them too many options to say yes, because more often than not, someone with responsibility is going to say yes every time.
All right. And so what happens is, around here, there's multitasking going on all the time, and I'm usually changing my mind on things all the time.
Sure.
and moving people in different direction, and Joyce is over there shaking her head. So, but what I discovered about Bria was that she seemed to be, you know, kind of disorganized because there were so many multitasking things. But after realizing what her strengths were and responsibility was it, I needed to change how I was approaching it. And so now we meet once a week, and I help her with the priorities.
Wow.
And then give her the proper feedback, and she's feeling like
more accomplished.
And wasn't that another one of her strengths where she needed
some individual praise? Yeah, so she has individualization
because I'm giving her that one-on-one time, which I wasn't doing that before. And I have to say, you know, we've seen a real difference in how she's approaching her work, and I think that she's less stressed, I would say, and you know, making less errors or whatever, because she's very focused and she's feeling comfortable in her role. But one little switch, like one little shift.
Right. And these are the stories that fuel organizations, because it was so minute and it was so easy to accomplish, and look at the productivity.
Instead of giving up or something like that.
Right, or saying you're bad at this.
I was going to ask you, you're bad at this, which would be like, oh, you're not a good fit or whatever.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the case.
Absolutely.
I haven't created the environment to to have her flourish.
Right.
So tell me another story example of that, where companies are able to really identify and make a small switch and what that can do.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories is when I was first getting started, I had a client who had number one, adaptability. Adaptability is a relationship building strength that's able to go from one to the other and sort of concentrate on what they need to focus on in that moment. And this client had been told over and over again that this was a weakness until she took her strengths assessment and found her number one weakness was actually her number one most functional strength. And now she's in a position where she's paid to go from this priority to this priority instantaneously.
And her boss probably understands her.
Yes, and he's fully aware, and she's thriving in her role, and he is so excited that he has someone like her on board.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah.
Awesome. You know, this also makes me think that from a career planning perspective, like I wish I would have taken this early on in my career to help with choices or direction or guidance. Do you see that happening? Like at the college age stage?
Yes, so there's actually a facet of Gallup that focuses on higher education that brings this assessment and really this belief into the college education system. So for colleges as well as young children. So there is something called the Strengths Quest test, and it's very similar to StrengthsFinder, but it's specific to ages 9 to about 13 to 14, depending on maturity level. And it helps children of that age really figure out, this is what you're great at, and here's kind of your lane. Let's try and stick to it, be more successful.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm going to certainly look into this a whole lot more, just because of some of the studying that we're doing on your 10-year-old self, which many of you may be familiar with. That's a new book that I'm writing about going back to when you were 10 and understanding what did you love, what were you great at, what were your strengths, so that you didn't change who you're meant to be because of peer pressure or social influence, but you stuck to them throughout life. That's interesting. So I'm going to want to definitely talk to you more about that, because just the age of 9 makes it intriguing for me. Yeah,
absolutely.
So why don't you tell our audience maybe how the name of the book maybe they could get, or how they can actually take this assessment, maybe costs around it, just some additional information if we kind of piqued their curiosity.
Yeah, sure. So I'll suggest a couple of books. The first and foremost being StrengthsFinder 2.0, where the test is available in the back of the book. An additional one is Strengths-Based Leadership. So obviously it's focused on strengths-based mindset for leaders themselves, whatever leadership means to you.
Yeah, actually, I think I'd love to touch upon that a moment.
Yeah, please.
So this strengths-based leadership, what was the big discovery in terms of what are the strengths that leaders have?
Sure. So Tom Rath was one of the main authors, and he and a group of psychologists traveled the world to interview leaders, whatever that meant for each industry, and to try and see if there's any similarities of these leaders are great because they have these specific strengths. And the fascinating discovery is that they found zero hard evidence on what makes a great leader. The only thing they found was that great leaders are ones that know their strengths and use them consistently. That was the only common denominator, and that's what the entire book is about.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
But I guess it's surprising though for me. I would think that there would be really a few attributes.
Competition or strategic, or these things you think of when you think of good leaders.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a quote unquote good leader, right?
But I like it that they have that introspection and they know what their strengths are, so that they're able to pull that out of others.
Right, absolutely.
That's exactly what they're doing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Is there anything else you want to add, or you think our audience would be interested in knowing?
Yeah, just logistically, the test itself, you could purchase it for $20. If you purchase it through a strengths coach, they also receive the results as well, so they can talk through them with you, like Krista and I have done. And the book itself, if you purchase that, the assessment is in the back of the book as well. And I would just encourage everyone to discover what your top talents are.
Yeah, that's great. I love this subject. I really do. So why don't we show the audience your contact information in case somebody wants to reach out to you.
Absolutely.
And if you're interested in hiring a speaker too, I would definitely recommend Lauren. I just thought you kind of owned that stage, and all of those strengths were like popping out of you right at the same time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So anything here that you want to to tell them about? Like, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So phone call and email, Lauren@laurenmcoaching.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well. I'm most active on LinkedIn. I also have a strengths Instagram account. So it's called @the_strengths girl. So if you have any cool strength stories, or if you have any evidence of your strengths being used, I would love for you to direct message me on Instagram, and I will be happy to post that. You will also see on my Instagram page something called the Unicorn Award.
Okay.
The Unicorn Award is something that I give out to the teams that I coach, and the award goes to one person per team. And that person has the rarest combination of strengths within their team. So that may mean that they have one of the 5 rarest strengths in their top 5. It could mean that they have a lot of influencing strengths, like Krista does. So she would probably get the Unicorn Award in my team.
I'll take a Unicorn Award. That's pretty cool.
And it never fails. The Unicorn Award almost always goes to the biggest, burliest man in the team. And so
because he has empathy.
Right. And I've had, to where they have a stuffed unicorn and they have to take a picture with it, or it's just a photo, a framed photo that says, I'm a unicorn. And so the purpose of this award is for the entire team to always be able to see when they walk into this person's office, that picture or that unicorn, and they can remember, this is the team's unicorn.
Yeah.
So
that's
they get
great.
a lot of
That's
publicity.
cute. I'll have to follow that,
Yeah.
definitely. I had one more question for you, because this is a real shift for some people in terms of how they think, their mindset changing from focusing on the weaknesses from a developmental standpoint, or pointing out weaknesses, or looking at the negative side. And I'm wondering, how do you approach that?
Yeah.
Because the weaknesses are there. I mean, they don't go away.
Right. So the adage is maximize your strengths, manage your weaknesses. One of the best parts about strengths is you understand what you're not great at.
Mm-hmm.
And all that is an opportunity for partnership, delegation, outsourcing. When you realize what buckets you don't fill, you fill them with the people around you. And weaknesses are really just strengths abused. So too much communication can be just a big talker with no real purpose, right? Too much empathy is a bleeding heart, right? But they all have power and benefits behind them. It's just outward focused. How does the strength that you have affect the people around you?
I had a boss once say that if you ask someone in an interview what their greatest strengths are, and let's just say they've never taken this and they have no idea. This was from the 80s. This was before they even came out with this.
Yeah.
If you ask someone what their greatest strengths are, to pay a lot of attention to that, because often it's their weakness.
Every time.
Really?
I would argue.
Right?
I would argue, yes.
Really?
I would argue every time, because if you think about it, they're always in tandem together. That was what I was always in trouble for in school, was just talking so much, right? I was friends with everyone around me because I just had to talk all day long. Communication's my number 2 strength. So now I just get paid to talk.
That's funny that you look at it. I'm glad we didn't practice that question, but it just came to mind, because I would use that interview question often, because I believe, Tim, that something's going to come out in their answer that's going to be helpful for me to better understand them and get to know them, and perhaps it is a weakness.
For sure.
Now I know. Yay.
Yeah.
Well, we've learned some things today, not just one thing, but many things today. So I want you all to mark your calendars for the Krista Moore Show. We're live every month. We were doing the 3rd Wednesday of every month, but we have so many guests lined up. We're starting to move to every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, 30 minutes. Kick your feet up, grab a cup of coffee, and I like to say that you can learn in a lifetime what you can learn in 30 minutes by just listening to a conversation and dialogue between myself and my guests. I'm going to ask you to introduce our next guest, because you know her.
Oh, sure.
So Wednesday, October 31st, Halloween, is Annie, and she's your friend, right?
Yes, Annie Franceschi. She just completed her very first book, Permission to Try. It is on my iBook app right now. I'm loving reading this story. I'll let her tell you, but she used to work for Disney, so I'll leave that there. She is one of the most intellectual and engaging women that I've ever met, so you would be in for a real treat.
Yep, we're looking forward to that. So that's October 31st. You can remember it's Halloween. We might even get a little dressed up.
Ooh.
I think she has some costumes from
I'm
Disney.
positive she does.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thanks for joining us. And please make sure that if you enjoyed this show, that you let others know to go to the KristaMooreShow.com website and click on past shows, and you can listen to all of our previous recordings. Thanks. Have a great day.
Thank you.